I came across this comment the other day that said banking in the US has always been about 10 years behind everywhere else for some reason. And I thought, yes, this has absolutely been my experience having moved to the UK as an American, and I realized how British banking was so much easier than American banking. So, like we always do on this channel, let's talk about it. The tale begins in 1968 when Britain launched the Bankers Automated Clearing System, known simply as BACS. But this wasn't just another technological upgrade. It represented a fundamental philosophy shift. For the first time, money could move between accounts without any physical representation. No gold coins changing hands, no paper checks traveling between buildings, no clerks with rubber stamps. Just electronic signals moving between computers. And BACS is revolutionary not just for the technology, but for its structure. Rather than each bank building its own system, British institutions created a shared national utility. Every major bank in the country agreed to speak the same electronic language, follow the same standards, and connect to the same central system. It was like building a national highway system, but for money. The transformation was swift and dramatic. By the early 1970s, payrolls had shifted wholesale onto BACS. Workers who had lined up every Friday for their wage packets suddenly found money appearing magically in their bank accounts. There's a phrase, cash on the nail, meaning immediate payment. And that began to lose its relevance when money could move without anyone actually handling cash. Now, America had its own electronic equivalent, the Automated Clearinghouse, or ACH, but here is where the stories get different. Rather than emerging as one coordinated national system, the ACH network grew like a patchwork, region by region, different operators, different standards, and different rules. The Federal Reserve operated some ACH centers while private companies ran others. Banks in California might use different messaging formats than banks in Texas. A payroll company in New York had to navigate different protocols depending on which employees banked where. Over time, these systems were gradually consolidated, but the fragmented beginning left permanent scars on the American financial landscape that those of us who are American have had to deal with for decades. And this wasn't just a technical issue or that they couldn't do it. It was a reflection of deeper American values. The United States has its tradition of states' rights and suspicion of federal coordination, allowing thousands of independent banks to maintain their own systems and standards. This is cultural. This is important to Americans to have this separation. The result was innovation in some areas, but also persistent inefficiencies that would plague the system. And the differences between the UK and the US system become crystal clear when you look at something as mundane as the personal check. In Britain, checks began their steady march towards extinction in the 1990s. Bank customers, spoiled by the instant convenience of electronic transfers, found checks were becoming antiquated. Why wait 3 days for a check to clear when you could transfer money instantly? By the 2010s, writing a check had become so unusual that most shop clerks didn't know how to process them. Walk through any British high street today and you'll struggle to find anyone writing a check. I've never seen anyone writing a check since living in the UK. Even more elderly customers, initially resistant to change, embraced debit cards and online banking when they discovered the superior convenience. In the United States, by contrast, checks remained stubbornly alive for a lot longer. Americans still write approximately 3.5 billion checks every year, a number that would seem incomprehensible to most Brits. The very phrase, "the check is in the mail," captures a uniquely American cultural reality, referring to money that's been sent but not yet received, existing in a sort of financial limbo. And speaking of money, you need somewhere to store your debit and credit cards, which leads me to the sponsor of today's video, Ekster. They've got tons of great products from wallets to bags to card holders, and I've been using this card holder to keep all of my cards in one place. The slim design makes it really easy to fit in my pocket, and the card ejector trigger is seriously one of the most genius inventions I've ever used. They have a variety of colors and designs in their wallets and card holders, so they can be for men and women. I'm actually gonna give their classic brown wallet to my dad, so hopefully he's not watching this. Now, Ekster also focuses on smart and trackable technology, which brings me to my favorite product, the Finder card. This is a game changer for anyone who is prone to losing their wallet. That's me. Or wants to keep track of their bag, maybe while you're traveling. You simply take this card and pair it with your phone. They have Apple and Android options. Then you just toss it in your bag or add it to your wallet so you can easily keep track of where your things are from your phone. Ekster are currently holding their fall sale with up to 35% off, and you can use my code London for an extra 10% off. Just click on the link in my description, and thanks again to Exter for sponsoring this video. Now, the next great leap forward for the UK came in 2008, when Britain introduced the faster payment service. This wasn't just an incremental improvement. This was a complete reimagining, again, of how money should move. Before faster payments, even electronic bank transfers could take 2 or 3 working days. This delay seemed increasingly absurd in an era of instant communication, and so the new system's specifications were ambitious. Transfers would complete within seconds, not days. Just like if you handed cash to someone, they would get it right at that moment if you're standing next to them. The service would operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, or 66 depending on the year. No more waiting until Monday because you needed to move money on a weekend. And critically, this wasn't positioned as a premium service for wealthy customers or a niche product for tech enthusiasts. It was designed as a universal national utility, adopted by virtually every bank in the country. The implementation was smooth because British banks had learned to coordinate through decades of shared systems, like BACS. Within months of the launch, customers across the country could make instant transfers regardless of which bank they used. And suddenly the friction that had always surrounded money movement vanished. You could pay the plumber the instant he finished fixing your sink, with money appearing in his account before he'd even packed up his tools. Splitting a restaurant bill among friends required no complex calculations about who had cash. Everyone could transfer their share instantly while still sitting at the table. And so Brits developed an expectation that money should move instantly, all of the time. Waiting even a few hours for a transfer to complete began to feel unreasonable. The United States, however, remained very anchored to the slower ACH system. Standard ACH transfers continued to take 1 to 3 business days, a delay that felt archaic compared to the rest of American life and how fast Americans move, but there you have it. Even the introduction of same-day ACH in 2016 only provided a partial solution. The system operated solely during business hours and shut down completely on weekends and holidays. And again, this kind of delay in this kind of banking system seems particularly absurd given America's technological leadership in other areas. Like, this is a country that's created some of the most sophisticated technological advances, yet moving $100 from one bank account to another took like 4 days. It wasn't until 2017 that a private consortium of American banks launched the real-time payments network. Even then, the rollout was voluntary. Banks could choose whether they wanted to join, which created kind of a patchwork of capabilities that confused customers and complicated business operations. The Federal Reserve finally entered the game in 2023 with FedNow, its own real-time payment system. But this came a full 15 years after Britain's faster payments had become universal. And again, American adoption remained voluntary, so many smaller community banks cited costs and technical reasons that meant they delayed joining the networks. So some Americans can now send instant transfers, but many still cannot. Now, the story of contactless payments also is a part of this story because Britain embraced this technology early with their characteristic coordination. Barclays issued the first contactless cards in the UK around 2007, initially limiting transactions to £10 to address security concerns. These early cards were kind of curiosities, used primarily for small purchases in coffee shops and convenience stores, but the real breakthrough came when Transport for London made the bold decision to integrate contactless payments directly into the underground and bus systems. I remember this change happening. Your ordinary bank card had become like a universal transport pass, and it worked across the entire network. This created a ripple effect that transformed British commerce. Retailers rushed to install contactless terminals, and Britain adopted it wholeheartedly. Within a few years, tapping had spread from coffee shops to supermarkets, from small corner shops to department stores, and by the mid-2010s in Britain, contactless payments were almost universal. Today, more than 9 out of 10 card payments in the country are contactless. The sign of someone inserting a card into a chip reader has become almost as unusual as writing a check, though of course you still have to do it occasionally when your bank wants to make sure it's still you and you know your PIN, which I often don't. And the transaction limit has gradually increased to £100, making contactless viable for much more routine purchases. Now, in the United States, let's fly back across the pond because the contactless rollout was much slower and very different. For Firstly, for a long time, American cards you had to swipe and then sign a receipt. Finally, they moved on to the chip and pin readers far after Britain did, and moving to contactless terminals just took a lot longer. And this was largely driven by liability issues that needed to be figured out because it would make the person in charge of the card reader or the company who owned the card reader responsible for fraud on magnetic transactions. So this created kind of a structure where retailers prioritized basic chip and pin over advanced features like contactless. Many American banks were slow to issue contactless cards, again citing security concerns or questioning whether consumers really wanted the technology, because often Americans weren't begging for it. They didn't know any different of what was happening in other countries, and so it was just the same as usual. When contactless payments finally began spreading in America, they were actually driven less by contactless cards and more by mobile wallets. Apple Pay and Google Pay gained significant traction, especially among younger consumers who were comfortable adding their card details to their phone and authenticating their payments with fingerprints or face scans. And still today, Americans who embrace contactless payments often do so through their phones rather than physical cards, even more so than those in the UK. But again, it's fragmented. Progressive American retailers in major cities often support mobile wallet payments very easily, so contactless is very easy to come by, and they've got their own sophisticated implementations. But venture into suburban or rural America sometimes, and you'll still find many merchants who require customers to swipe that magnetic strip or struggle with just basic chip and pin readers. The variance in experience is far greater than in Britain, where contactless is universal. Now let's talk about person-to-person payments, because this is another area where the countries differ, and America has just dragged its heels. Britain, with its foundation of universal instant banking, developed a characteristically systematic solution. Paym, launched in 2014, allowed people to send money directly to mobile phone numbers rather than complex account details. Built on top of the existing faster payments infrastructure, these transfers were instant, universal, and free, and you could all do it because your phone number became your payment address. Now, Paym has since been retired, but the underlying capability is stronger than ever. Every major British banking app today allows instant, free transfers between accounts using nothing more than account numbers or sometimes just names from your contact list that it's saved. The experience is seamless because it's built into the underlying infrastructure rather than layered on top. Venmo became nothing short of a cultural phenomenon, whether you were splitting dinner bills, splitting rent shares, or contributing to group gifts. The phrase was Venmo me. Cash App carved out its own niche with features that extended far beyond simple money transfers, including Bitcoin trading and stock investing. Then you have Zelle, backed by a lot of major banks that attempted to provide a more universal solution. Zelle was integrated into many banking apps and promised the convenience of app-based payment with the security of traditional banking. But Zelle's coverage remains incomplete. Not every bank participates. This is where America differs, and transfer speeds can vary based on the institution involved. And this creates a uniquely American banking problem: fragmentation. Before sending money to someone, you need to navigate a complex decision tree. Do they use Venmo? Are they on Cash App? Is their bank Zelle enabled? Do they prefer PayPal? The mental overhead of managing multiple payment relationships became a real source of friction for consumers. Meanwhile, in Britain, paying a friend is simply a built-in banking function, no matter which bank they're with. Open any British banking app, select a contact or enter account details, and tap send. The money arrives instantly regardless of which banks are involved, and there's no need to coordinate on platforms or worry about app compatibility. Now, the role of geography in shaping these differences does have to be addressed. Britain is a compact nation where regulatory changes can reach every corner of the country quickly. When British regulators or major banks decide to implement a new system, they're dealing with a more manageable number of institutions serving a population that could fit comfortably into the state of California. America does have vastly different challenges. The United States spans 6 time zones and encompasses regions with dramatically different economic conditions, regulatory preferences, political attitudes, cultural attitudes, and more. And the sheer number of American financial institutions compounds the problem. The United States has thousands of banks and credit unions, from global giants like JP Morgan to tiny community banks serving single counties. Coordinating changes across this diverse banking ecosystem does require a lot of effort, and often it results in slower uptake. But still, despite that, after having lived in the UK for over 10 years by now, I'm very grateful for the British banking system and how easy it is to use. That brings me to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something new. Leave your comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.